Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of this teaching on the Feast of Trumpets. I'm just totally stoked to be able to talk about this subject with you. This is something that God really revealed to me a few years back, several years ago, and it's something that I've instituted in my walk with the Lord, and I've been teaching my family. And when I was in pastoral ministry at a local church, I taught the people, and we observed these things, and it was just so enriching and fulfilling to understand God and His patterns and His ways, and finally learn the language that He's speaking, which is a lot of type and shadow and pictures, and these are living parables. I'm smoking the Illusione Cruzado still. I'm about that far. Oh, I knocked my ash. Look at that. Well, it is what it is. The worst thing ever about smoking cigars is when you just wear that ash. Especially when you got a big old one going and you just own that all over yourself. Hey, no risk, no reward. But we're talking about the Feast of Trumpets, which is actually coming up this week. And it's the only feast that nobody knows when it starts. No man knows the day or the hour of when the Feast of Trumpets starts. Every other feast happens midway through the month or just right thereafter. There's delineated points where you know when this is coming. This is the only feast that starts the first of the month. And the way that God's calendar works is that the months are determined by when the new moon shows. Well, this is the only feast that happens on a new moon. So it's called Yom Teruah, or the Feast of Trumpets. There's a lot of different names for them. The most popular one you're going to hear is Rosh Hashanah. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with trumpets. This was a religiously created idea. Rosh Hashanah basically means the head of the year. This is the Jewish New Year. And on the Jewish calendar, people say there's a civil calendar and a religious calendar. I don't care about all that stuff. I just care about what the Bible says. According to the Bible, this is not the biblical New Year on God's calendar. You can have whatever calendar you want. You can go on the Mayan calendar. You can go on the Klingon calendar. I don't give a rip what you do. But I'm talking about God's calendar. On God's calendar, this is not the New Year. This is the 7th month. So, and it's the month of Tishri, is what it's called. I think. Yes, it's Tishri. So, on the first of the month, here's the thing. The moon goes away, obviously. You watch the moon wax and wane. The moon disappears. Well, when it reappears, just this little bitty tiny sliver. And what would happen is, everybody would be knowing that it was the beginning of the 7th month, and it was a Sabbath day, and it was going to be the Day of Trumpets, the Feast of Trumpets. So everybody would be looking for this new moon, and it's right in the middle of when they're harvesting, and it's the end of the year, and they're starting to bring in crops, and they're working in the fields, and they're doing all that stuff, and everybody's ready because they don't know when it's going to appear. Now, with modern computers and technology, we can predict this probably till 1,000 years from now, or a million years from now, or whatever. No, because we can all dial in the algorithms and whatever people like that do. But here's the thing: the criteria is that it has to be spotted, has to be seen from the ground, from Israel, basically, because that's where the Bible was written. So theoretically, it would be that land. And sometimes it's cloudy or it's raining and it's not spotted, so it doesn't start that day. So no person knows the day or the hour of when this starts. Very interesting. Let me give you a little explanation on this term Yom Teruah, because Teruah means, it's a Jewish word, and it means shout, blast, or a loud noise. It's also called the Day of Shouting, Day of the Awakening Blast, the Hidden Day, the Coronation of the King, the Wedding of the Messiah, the Day of Judgment, the Day of the Opening of the Books, the Day of the Opening of the Gates. Now, that's not all listed in Scripture. That's just from history, what's been tradition, and has been attached to this. So I want to just preface that. I'm just giving you some historical context to kind of show you how they observed this feast, because I really want you to understand the technical part of it, so you can understand the prophetic implication of the shadow picture that this thing is. Very, very cool. Let me read you this from Leviticus 23, 24, and 25. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, see, It's the 7th month. It's not the 1st month. In the 1st day of the month you shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work. I like that word servile. It's so King Jamesy therein, but shall make an offering. You're going to like this part. Shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord, or Yahweh. Got you covered. So, like I said, this is the feast, the only feast with an uncertain beginning. And when they blew the shofar, it was very interesting because they would have 4 different blasts. They had the tekiah, which was a strong, long, just straight blast. The severim, which is 3 short blasts. The teruah, which is 9 short blasts in short succession. They do that like 11 times. And then at the very, very end, they had the tekiah hagodalah, which was the last trump, and this was as loud and as long as you could keep air in your lungs and blow it through that horn, that shofar. They would do that. That was the tekiah hagodalah. And all the breath that the person blowing the shofar had in their lungs would blow through that shofar. All the wind. So, wind representing spirit. Now let me get a little spiritual on you. Representing spirit is going through a shofar which is made of bone and blood. Now, that represents the translation of a person at the coming of the Lord. Because this is what this symbolizes. It symbolizes the coming of Messiah and all of us being changed in the twinkling of an eye. Which is very sweet. So let me tell you the story of what they would do. Back in the day, so there I was. What they would do is, like I said, they were in harvest time, and they were out working, but they knew that this was coming up. They didn't know if it was going to be, Tuesday or Wednesday. They couldn't just say, okay, well, let's just schedule this on the calendar like they could all the other feasts, because they didn't know when that moon was going to show up. If it was cloudy, if it was overcast, they couldn't see it, it wasn't the day. So what they had to do? They had to get ready. They had to prepare in advance. They had to make sure everything was done and ready so that they could go in and observe the feast and blow the shofar and have this big party. And basically that's all they did. They just blew trumpets, rested. It was a Sabbath day. They did no work, didn't work out in their fields, and they had a big party. And if you went back and probably asked them, why do you do this? They'd be like, no idea. God just said to do it, so we do it, and it's fun, and I've had this wine saved up that I want to drink, and bada bing, doing it, so chilling out here, smoking cigars. Hey, day of trumpets, blow the shofar, bada bing, bada boom, having a good time. So, what they would do is they would get everything ready. They would get the food prepared, because they knew it was going to be here, in a short time. And they would take their white linen garments, their nice clothes, and they would make sure that they were without spot, they were without wrinkle, they would get them all done up and nice. And what would happen is they would be working out in the field and harvesting or just doing whatever, going about their business. But everything was ready. They had made themselves ready because they knew not the day or the hour. Do you see the prophetic parallels here? It's so awesome. So what would happen is it would have to be 2 witnesses, and I know this from just reading history and all this stuff. 2 witnesses would come and spot the new moon. They would go to the temple, to the Sanhedrin. They would call up to the Sanhedrin, and they would say, hey, we've spotted the new moon. We'll go on record as witnesses because everything is established by 2 or 3 witnesses. These witnesses, they would say, come up here. The witnesses would go up to where the Sanhedrin chambers were. They would give legal testimony that they both had spotted the new moon. One would give testimony, one would confirm. So those 2 witnesses. And then the Sanhedrin would say, okay, it's done, it's been spotted, it's official, go blow the shofar. So what they would do, they'd go out, it was one guy, it was 100 guys, I don't know, I wasn't there, but they would go out and they would blow the shofar from the temple. Now, when you heard that sound, nobody knew when it was going to come. Nobody knew. They knew the time, they knew the season, but they didn't know the day, and they didn't know the hour. That's why we're commanded to know the season. That's why Jesus rebuked the Pharisees for not knowing the season. We know the season, but we don't know the day or the hour that Christ will return. So, whenever they were out there working in the fields and they're out there just getting it done, and they're hustling because it's coming to harvest season, and that's when they're making their cash money. They're getting that harvest in that they've worked so hard on. Immediately when they heard that, they would drop their rakes or their whatever they were using, they would stop with the tractors, and they would leave everything in the field. And they would come into the house, they would get clean, they would put on their garments, and they would sit down and they would have the feast. And they would blow the shofar, and they would do all that stuff. And as people heard that shofar blast going out, say you were living up in Galilee, the Galilee area in northern Israel, and you weren't by Jerusalem, where you probably couldn't, I wouldn't think, hear that from the Temple Mount. Well, people would light signal fires from hill to hill and blow shofars so that word of it spread all over in a very short period of time. And that's why maybe an hour or so before, the trumpet blew at the temple, but you didn't know the day or the hour. You didn't know when it was official, so maybe you didn't get it until 15 minutes later, or you saw a signal fire and you heard a trumpet, because people just started blowing shofars all over the place. So the symbolizing of that is, for us now, we know that the Lord is coming, and Christ likened his return to this feast. The terminology that he uses directly correlates to the Feast of Trumpets, to this Yom Teruah. And on the next video, we're going to get into that a little bit more. If you haven't followed us yet on Instagram and Twitter, do it now. Also, we're on Facebook now. So you can go to facebook.com/blessedleafcommunity. I'll put it up right here. And like us and say nice stuff about us. But on Instagram and Twitter, follow us also on that. It's at blessed_leaf. Posting stuff on there all the time. Totally cool. And if you haven't joined Blessed Leaf, maybe you just clicked on this podcast, or you stumbled across this on YouTube, or for whatever reason you haven't joined yet, get on blessedleaf.com. Join this awesome online church community for cigar smokers. We'd be so stoked, so blessed to have you on there, and it would just be a very, very cool thing. So it's been good talking to you today. We'll come back tomorrow with the next part of this and get into the types and shadows. It's going to be awesome. So enjoy your cigar. Have a good one. God bless you. Bye-bye.